About a month ago, the last open bit of Lake Erie froze over, 2 weeks later than average according to the National Ice Center. Erie is pretty much the only Great Lake that ever freezes over during the winter, even though on balance, it's the southernmost of the 5 lakes. To explain this, we need a little background. Most substances expand when they're warmed and contract when they're cooled. That is, their density increases as temperature decreases. But fresh water reaches its maximum density at a temperature of 39 degrees. That's when water is heaviest. At lower temperatures, its density actually decreases. That is, the water becomes lighter. And here's how that applies to the freezing of lakes. As winter approaches, water near the surface cools to 39 degrees. And being relatively heavy, this chilled water sinks and helps cool the rest of the lake. The new water at the top then cools to 39 and also sinks. And this process of vertical mixing continues until all the water in the lake is about 39. Only then will the surface waters cool further and eventually allow the top of the lake to start to freeze. Now here's the average depth of each Great Lake. Erie is by far the shallowest. Huron's next, and it's 3 times deeper on average. Now looking at the surface area of the lakes, Erie is the second smallest. Only Ontario is smaller, and not by much. The combination of small depth and relatively small area means that the volume of water in Lake Erie is the least of all the Great Lakes, about 25 times less than Superior, the northernmost of the lakes. So there's simply less water overall to cool in Lake Erie, and as a result, if a Great Lake freezes over during the winter, it's Erie. This was the scene from space about a month ago. Here's Erie, Ontario, Huron, Michigan, and Superior. Some of the white over the lakes is cloudiness, but anywhere you see blue, you're seeing the water. And Erie is the only lake that had a substantial amount of ice on it. Let's close in on western and central Lake Erie. One thing this shows pretty well is that the ice can be pushed around by the wind. On this day, there's open water on the north side of the lake, suggesting that the winds were northerly, shoving the ice toward the southern shore. Let's also take a closer look at the northeast end of the lake. Again, some of the white here is cloudiness, but there's also a lot of ice fragments at that end. And this is where the lake empties into the Niagara River. To stop these chunks of ice from clogging the river and causing problems at hydroelectric plants, a 2-mile-long chain of floating steel pontoons called an ice boom is strung across the lake near Buffalo each year late in the fall. It's then removed in late March or April once the ice threat is over. Combined, the 5 Great Lakes contain almost 1/4 of the world's fresh surface water, about 6,000 trillion gallons, enough to cover the lower 48 states with water to a depth of almost 10 feet. Fred is back with the extended forecast next.